Most people believe that their decisions are completely their own. They like to think that every choice they make is the result of logic, free will, or personal preference. Yet beneath the surface of conscious reasoning, there are invisible forces shaping perception long before a decision is ever made. Influence is subtle. It does not announce itself. It enters quietly through repeated exposure, emotional experiences, social expectations, and internal narratives that were formed long before true self-awareness developed. A woman who begins to study psychological influence realizes that choice is rarely spontaneous. It is prepared in advance by patterns of belief, memory, and conditioning that operate in the background of everyday life. Neuroscience suggests that the brain often initiates action milliseconds before conscious awareness catches up. This means that what feels like a sudden decision may actually be the final step of a process that began much earlier. Understanding this truth can be both liberating and unsettling. Liberating because it reveals that identity is flexible. Unsettling because it challenges the comforting illusion that we are always in control of our inner world. From early childhood, emotional experiences begin to define what feels safe, desirable, or threatening. These emotional imprints influence future behavior in ways that often remain unconscious until deliberately examined. Social environments also play a powerful role. Cultural expectations, family dynamics, and relational patterns create frameworks through which reality is interpreted. Over time, these frameworks become so familiar that they feel like personal truth. Dark psychology explores how influence can be used intentionally, both constructively and destructively. It examines the mechanisms through which attention is captured, trust is built, and behavior is subtly guided without overt coercion. For women seeking deeper self-mastery, understanding influence is not about manipulation. It is about awareness. It is about recognizing how internal and external forces shape emotional reactions and behavioral tendencies. When awareness increases, automatic responses begin to slow down. Instead of reacting instantly, she develops the capacity to observe her impulses and question their origin. This creates psychological distance between stimulus and response. In that distance lies power. Power not over others, but over the direction of one's own evolution. The ability to pause allows new possibilities to emerge that were previously hidden by habitual thinking. Influence can also be self-generated. The stories a woman tells herself about her worth, potential, and limitations gradually shape the range of choices she perceives as available. If she repeatedly internalizes narratives of inadequacy, she may unconsciously choose environments that confirm those beliefs. Conversely, cultivating empowering narratives expands the horizon of perceived opportunities. This process highlights the importance of psychological boundaries. Without clear internal standards, external influences can easily distort priorities and lead to decisions that feel misaligned with authentic values. As she refines her awareness, she begins to notice patterns in her relationships. She sees how certain dynamics subtly shape her behavior, encouraging compliance or resistance depending on emotional context. Recognizing these dynamics does not necessarily require confrontation. Sometimes the most profound transformation occurs through quiet recalibration, where she gradually changes her responses rather than attempting to change others. Over time, this recalibration strengthens self-trust. Decisions become less reactive and more intentional. Emotional fluctuations still occur, but they no longer dictate direction. Neuroplasticity supports this evolution. The brain is capable of forming new pathways that support different behavioral patterns when reinforced through consistent awareness and practice. This means that influence is not a fixed force. It can be reshaped, by consciously selecting environments, information, and relationships. She participates actively in the construction of her psychological landscape. However, this process requires patience. Deep conditioning does not dissolve overnight. It softens gradually as new experiences accumulate and reinforce alternative ways of perceiving reality. There may be moments of uncertainty during this transition. Old patterns lose their authority, while new patterns are still developing. This in-between space can feel uncomfortable, yet it is often where the most meaningful growth occurs. In this space, she learns to tolerate ambiguity. Instead of rushing into familiar decisions for the sake of certainty, she allows time for deeper clarity to emerge. As clarity increases, influence becomes more transparent. She recognizes subtle attempts to shape her perception and evaluates them with discernment rather than emotional urgency. This discernment enhances personal sovereignty. She no longer feels compelled to justify every choice or explain every boundary. Her decisions reflect internal alignment rather than external pressure. Influence, when understood, becomes a tool for intentional self-development. By exposing herself to environments that inspire growth, she reinforces neural patterns associated with confidence and resilience. Similarly, reducing exposure to environments that trigger insecurity or self-doubt helps stabilize emotional equilibrium. This selective engagement is not avoidance. It is strategic self-care. Over time, this strategy shapes identity. Others begin to perceive her as composed, thoughtful, and psychologically grounded. These perceptions further influence how she is treated and what opportunities arise. This creates a feedback loop in which internal influence and external response reinforce each other. Positive shifts in self-perception lead to different interactions, which in turn support continued growth. Despite these advancements, self-awareness remains an ongoing practice. Influence never disappears completely. It evolves with new experiences and changing environments. Maintaining clarity requires regular reflection. Moments of solitude, journaling, or mindful observation help recalibrate priorities and ensure that choices remain aligned with long-term vision. In leadership contexts, understanding influence enhances strategic communication. She learns when to speak, when to listen, and when to allow silence to shape perception. This balance between expression and restraint fosters credibility. Others sense that her actions are guided by intention rather than impulse. As her influence grows, she becomes more aware of the responsibility it carries. True psychological power is not about control but about inspiring transformation through example. This perspective shifts her focus from competition to contribution. She recognizes that empowering herself can also create space for others to evolve. The journey toward conscious influence is deeply personal. It requires honesty about internal fears, motivations, and aspirations that may have been hidden for years. Yet with each layer of awareness, she gains greater freedom. Freedom to choose relationships that nourish growth, careers that align with purpose, and lifestyles that reflect authentic values. This freedom does not eliminate challenges. Instead, it equips her with psychological tools to navigate complexity with composure and resilience. Over time, she recognizes that influence precedes every meaningful decision. By shaping her internal environment, she shapes the quality of her choices. This realization transforms how she approaches daily life. Small habits, conversations, and emotional reactions are no longer random events, but opportunities to refine identity. With this awareness, she steps into a more intentional version of herself. A version that is less driven by unconscious conditioning and more guided by deliberate vision. Her presence begins to communicate stability and depth. Others may not fully understand the transformation, yet they sense the shift in energy and respond accordingly. This response reinforces her commitment to self-mastery. Each aligned decision strengthens the belief that she can shape her psychological reality through conscious influence. Ultimately, understanding influence is about reclaiming authorship of one's life story. It is about moving from passive reaction to intentional creation. For women who feel ready to explore this process more deeply, structured psychological frameworks can provide guidance and acceleration without compromising individuality. If you sense that your evolution is calling you toward a more refined level of awareness, you may feel drawn to explore the Feminine Sovereignty Protocol available through the link in the description. It is a private pathway designed for women who are prepared to move beyond surface change and embody a quiet yet undeniable psychological authority.